So welcome. Thank you again for joining us for today's webinar, Closing the Loop for Lupus, a fireside chat. I'm Katie Schubert. I'm president and CEO of the Society for Women's Health Research. SWHR is the thought leader in promoting research on biological sex differences in disease and improving women's health through science, policy, and education. And lupus is an autoimmune disease that most commonly affects the joints, skin, brain, heart, kidneys, and blood vessels. However, it can cause inflammation and pain, as well as damage in any part of the body. Systemic lupus erythematosus, my apologies, is the most common type of lupus affecting multiple parts of the body, while cutaneous lupus erythematosus, CLE, primarily affects the skin. You can tell it's Monday morning when my pronunciation is having trouble. 90% of lupus patients are women between the ages of 15 and 44. And while we know that lupus is more prevalent among women of color who also develop symptoms at younger ages and have more symptoms and complications from the disease, there are significant gaps in our understanding of the sex, gender, and racial or ethnic disparities associated with lupus. Women living with lupus have a greater risk for developing lupus nephritis, heart disease, osteoporosis, or even other autoimmune conditions. There's no cure for lupus, so the available treatments primarily focus on reducing symptom flares, which limits the positive health outcomes for patients. SWHR launched its lupus program to increase awareness and address the impact of lupus on women's health across the lifespan. And as part of National Bone and Joint Action Week, we're hosting today's fireside chat to increase visibility of the patient experience and emphasize ways to empower others and improve quality of care and general well-being for women living with lupus. We're pleased to have three amazing panelists joining us today: Ayana Duki, Presha Cardile, and Juana Mata. These women will share their personal journeys with lupus, each unique, but hopefully providing insight for those of you watching as how you might navigate your own health journey or support other women during theirs. I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's event, Eli Lilly and Company and Aurinia Pharmaceuticals. SWHR maintains editorial control and independence over program development, content, and work products. And as we always do, we are live tweeting during this event, and we invite you to use the hashtags SWHR Talks Lupus, as well as SWHR Talks Autoimmune on all social media. And with that, I would like to introduce SWHR's Chief Science Officer, Dr. Irene Aninye, who will be moderating today's event.
Thank you, Katie, and welcome everyone. Allow me to further introduce our panel of lupus warriors. Ayana Duki is a New York-based stand-up comedian, writer, and co-host of Hydroxychloroquine's, a podcast on living with lupus. Having lived with lupus for almost a decade, she uses her comedy and podcast to raise lupus awareness while also advocating for her fellow warriors. Welcome, Ayana. Presha Cardile currently works as an HRIS business analyst with Emerson Electric Company, based in St. Louis, Missouri. She serves as part of the organization's Diverse Abilities Employee Resource Group Global Leadership Team and as a director of the DRMK Memory Foundation based in Nashik, India. Presha began writing about her story and journey to a systemic lupus diagnosis in October 2021, shedding light on topics critical to chronic illness management, such as mental health awareness and improving accessibility in the workplace. Juana Mata is a children's social worker for the Department of Children and Family Services, where she has worked for the past 27 years. After experiencing her own challenges with navigating an accurate lupus diagnosis and care journey, Juana co-founded Looms for Lupus, a nonprofit organization that provides support for lupus survivors, their families, and caregivers. She is a national ambassador for the NIH All of Us research program and advocates with local, state, and national government officials to raise awareness and self-advocacy, and advocates for lupus, fibromyalgia, and mental health. Juana lives in La Puente, California, with her husband and has 2 sons and 2 grandchildren. Now, we do have some topics today that we would like to cover, but those of you who are tuned in live are invited to submit questions throughout the event. You can do that using Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to address as many questions as we can during this program, especially submissions that cover recurring themes or questions that are broadly applicable to our audience. Please note that our conversation today is intended for educational purposes and not intended or implied to serve as a substitute for medical or professional advice. SWHR encourages all patients and consumers to consult a professional healthcare provider to determine any individual needs. And so with that, if our panel can join us, Ayana and Presha and Juana. Welcome.
Hello.
And so
Hello.
you just open up and get some audience feedback today. And so we're going to start off with a bit of a poll. And we just want to know who's on the line. How are you connected to lupus? I have lupus. I work in the lupus space. For example, a healthcare worker, researcher, industry, or advocacy. I'm a caregiver for someone with lupus, or I know a friend or family member with lupus, or there's some other relationship you have to lupus. We'll leave the vote open, the poll open for another about 5 or 10 seconds. Again, how are you connected to lupus? You can select all that apply. Awesome. As we're about closing the poll, we see a bit of a distribution. A lot of individuals that work in the space or have a family or friend in the space. According to a Lupus Foundation of America Lupus Awareness Survey, 50% of Americans report knowing someone personally who has lupus. And so our next question that we just want to, on a scale of 1 to 5, how familiar are you with lupus? 1 being not familiar at all, and 5 being extremely familiar. I have a couple more seconds before closing this poll. On a scale of 1 to 5, how familiar are you with lupus? 1, not familiar at all, to 5, extremely familiar. Thank you. So we're somewhere around the 3. We have a couple 5s. So majority, or about half, is moderately familiar with lupus. Thank you so much for participating. And so with that, let's chat. As you guys can see from our polls, there's some familiarity. People are somewhat in the space, but there's still, of course, much to learn and to be able to discuss. So I'll open with a question to our panel. How do you explain your lupus to someone new? And maybe you can give an example of how you've explained or educated someone else about the impacts of this invisible disease. And they've gotten that aha moment of, I understand what you're saying now.
I guess I'm going first. I feel like I'm playing Family Feud, who hits the buzzer first. How I describe lupus is my immune system is always turned up. It's just always at a party, just like Nuck if you buck. That's for all my 80s babies. So essentially, if a healthy person gets sick, their immune system comes in, says, hey, let me do my job, does their job, and then goes back to chilling. Mine looks at my organs, healthy tissue in my body as an attack, and it just goes to town on that, and it doesn't turn off. So I have to always be mindful of that. Always, I'm taking drugs to minimize that damage that my immune system is trying to do, because it's just always turned on. So that's usually how I try to explain it in layman's terms to folks who don't know.
Hello. And how I explained or talk to somebody that doesn't know about lupus is I usually say, we know what lupus is my immune system is overactive. You know, just imagine, and I'll talk a little bit about lupus. You know, lupus is an autoimmune condition, which means that my body is attacking itself. And a lot of the times what I also say is that just imagine, you know, our army is our immune system. Our army is there to protect. Imagine if the army turns on itself and it starts attacking each other. I said, so that's how my body reacts. My body, it's supposed to be, my immune system is supposed to protect my body, but instead it starts attacking my organs. And unfortunately, it attacks every major organ in my body when I go through a flare. So that's how I usually explain it. A lot of the times I do go more into detail as to how it affects my daily life. Usually a healthy person, can do many things, but with lupus, I can't do a lot of things like going out to the beach, going out to the park with my kids, my grandkids. So I have to always be careful and stay away from certain things that hurt my body or that will make me have a flare, which means that my own body will start attacking itself.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better than how both Juana and Ayana have put it, but I always describe it again as waging a war within yourself. Every single day, every single hour, every single minute, every single second. There is no stopping. And the way I describe lupus has evolved as I have come to understand it, and how the way it reacts to my body, because not everybody's lupus is the same. So the way we describe it is not the same either. So yeah, definitely it is waging a war within yourself, and it's an army, your own army attacking you in many ways. It's also been very helpful for me to explain lupus on a situation by situation basis to people. Say, for example, I'd be with a group of individuals eating outside, or just being in a social situation. Oh, Prisha, why don't you drink? Oh, it's because I have lupus. Lupus does this to me, and therefore I cannot engage in the said activity. So that's kind of how because I feel like it many times is quite overwhelming for people to listen to the explanation, and then I think there comes a point where people just forget that, oh, this individual has a chronic autoimmune disease, and then we should be considerate in certain situations as well. So I always make sure that I reference the situation at hand and then let them know, oh, how does lupus affect me in that particular setting?
And so, you've talked about waging war, managing, inflammation symptoms. What would you say is your most bothersome symptom, and how do you manage it when it flares up?
For me, it's the fatigue. And so how I manage it is I just stay active. I have to stay active because of course, I do listen to my body as far as how much I can do. But I feel that if I don't stay active, the fatigue gets worse, or just the body aches, the fatigue, and my mental health get worse if I don't do something that keeps me going, like exercising. And I mean, we're all different. So we have to also see what we can do and how much we can do. So staying active for me, and just doing things that I like or that I enjoy, calling my mom, calling my sister, and getting up in the morning, doing my makeup, and just feeling good, or trying to feel good, because the fatigue, it doesn't matter the time or the day, the fatigue is there. And so I just try to, just keep it up, doing things that will help me. But again, we're all different. So we all have to do different things that are going to help us, and not because staying active helps me, it's going to help somebody else.
And so that's pretty interesting that you say activity helps with the fatigue. Have you guys found that as well, that if you're tired and you do something, or that it will help to perk up? And so what do you do with your fatigue?
With me, it's not a matter of do the exercise when I'm feeling tired. It's if I'm not consistently participating in some kind of exercising routine, and whatever that looks like for me, I do my best to lift 5 times a week for 30 minutes. It's nothing crazy. I'm not like trying to become the Hulk. But I'm 40, I'm going to be 41 in like 2 weeks. And I mean, 40-year-old women, they always tell us that your bones are getting, I'm probably saying it wrong, but our bones are getting weaker as we age. So it's necessary that we keep up with that, even if you didn't have lupus. But the same thing with Juana, if I don't exercise, that it sounds counterintuitive, but if I'm not on a consistent exercising routine, that fatigue will just knock me on my tail. And like she said, comes out of nowhere. Yesterday, I went to, my friend got tickets to a Broadway play, first time I'd ever been, and I had to wear sunglasses during the entire production because the lights were just so bright. And I was just already so tired. And I pushed myself to do that because it's Broadway and I had never been. To go back to the original question, with me, depending on what the season is, like this seasonal change right now in New York, that's where I'm based. My joints are up and down. So some days, something as simple as opening a bottle of seltzer, it ain't happening. It's not, I can stare at that bottle and I can try to open it with my mind, because I am probably going to be better off opening it with my mind than my hands, because my joints are just so inflamed at that point. So with me, in addition to the fatigue, which is crippling, not being able to do basic things with my hands, like put my hair in a ponytail or open a bottle, or just the achiness of that, or even working out, trying to get down to do a push-up or something along those lines. I can't do a push-up, I mean, on my knees. I don't want anybody thinking I'm that strong. But yeah, that's the thing that really gets me.
Yeah, fatigue is incredibly debilitating, especially if it hits you out of nowhere, because there is no inkling, and one day you'll wake up and you'll be fine, and then the second half of the day you're done, and then you'll wake up the next day and you're fine. And so there's a lot of unpredictability, just in general, with plans, with things you want to do. And, there's also a lot of anxiety accompanying that, because you don't know if you're going to show up with, your natural self, or you're going to have to push yourself. But very recently, I got into kind of splitting my workout. So I'm one of those people who has developed exercise intolerance. So if I go a minute up from my 15 minutes of cardio in one go, I'm looking at a flare up. So I kind of have to pace myself out. And a lot of it, my journey kind of started with really trying to understand the limitations of my body, because I tried to push myself initially, and I thought, yeah, you just have to get one more minute in, and you're going to develop a lot of strength through it. But no, so I have to honor my limitation when it comes to managing my fatigue. But to go back to the original question, I think the most annoying symptom really that I deal with is it's called pleuritis, which is basically inflammation of your lung wall. Hopefully I'm explaining that right. But it really, it affects day-to-day breathing. If I walk a little faster than I usually do, it starts hurting. If I laugh, it starts hurting. If I yawn, it starts hurting. So when I'm on Netflix watching Friends, that's become a painful activity, and it does not make me happy. But it's also taught me to, lupus is an exercise in patience, and it's taught me to kind of take it easy and listen to my body a bit more than I used to. So yeah, that's, I just, there's no happy ending to a pleuritis. I know that, but like every day, and like each of us do, I just face it with a smile, and that's just how I deal with it.
In you guys having various experiences, of course, we know everyone's journey is different, but I'm just constantly hearing, listen to your body. And that seems to be very important, because it's a daily or even an hourly listen, right? You mentioned just going over 15 minutes of exercise versus one morning or the evening. And so when you guys have these types of, the challenges with engaging in the morning or in the middle of your day, what do you do with your work and your school? And, from that standpoint, did you seek any workplace or school accommodations? But more so, what did you consider Like, how did you process through? Do I tell my employer? Do I ask for something? What were the types of questions and considerations that you had for those who might be at home trying to figure out, what do I do, or how do I process this?
For me, accommodations or even talking about it at work was pretty easy. I've been working for the same department for now 28 years. So it was pretty easy for me to be open about it. I haven't really, since I was diagnosed, I haven't taken a lot of time off because I felt the support, because I was open with my supervisors and with my coworkers. I was open to where I not only talked about what lupus was, I also received the help and the support from them, where if I needed to move a big file from one place to another, I received the assistance. So it was pretty easy for me to ask for certain accommodations like the lighting or getting an ergonomics workstation. So for me, it was easy, I guess, because I had that relationship with my supervisor, my coworkers. But what also with parking, for example, I am very sensitive to the sunlight or to the sun, the UV lights. So I got the accommodation. So I think just being really open, if you're comfortable. I mean, not everyone is going to be comfortable to be open about a condition. For me, it was, and I mean that there was times where I was working and I was just not feeling well. And a lot of the time, or a couple of times, 4 times to be specific, I went from being in the office to being in ICU for 6 days. So I had to be open about it. And I would come back to work and I would get the help and the support that I needed. So for me, it was easy. And I believe it was because I was very open about my condition.
For me, it varies. I've had multiple jobs since having lupus. On the 9th of November, it will be exactly 10 years. And so the company, when I was diagnosed, that job, I'd been there for a while, and I was new to having lupus. I didn't know what to ask for. Having a disease was just very foreign to me. And my manager, I don't know if it was a factor of I didn't know what to ask for, or they just didn't understand the severity of it. There was not much accommodation. Now that I'm older and I'm more familiar, more comfortable, and I use that word loosely, with lupus, I'm very adamant about letting people know what I need. And I have no qualms letting people know if what they've provided are not meeting my requirements. So at night, I'm a comedian. If I need to cancel a show, most of the people I work with, they're very flexible. I don't cancel very often, but if I do, call that in and say, hey, I'm not making it. I don't receive any type of, no one's upset. No one's gonna say they're never gonna book me again or anything crazy like that. During the day, I'm an engineer, and my company, I don't think they're very accommodating. So for that reason, I have to be that much more vocal about things. And what that looks like is me being very specific with what I need. Me letting them know these lights are not there. They have UVA and UVB. And this impacts people with lupus. It causes migraines. Sending links. It's more proactive than I would prefer to be, but there's a side of me that feels like in 2022 I shouldn't have to be, but I do. That's the reality of my situation right now. And if anybody is going through that, I recommend that not only do you express your concerns, but also come with solutions, because lupus isn't a disease that most people are aware of. It might be familiar to you, and to your family, but if you come to your employer, your supervisor, just make sure you also have suggestions on what it is they need to do. Don't expect them to create those suggestions, those solutions for you. Be as direct as possible.
I completely agree. For me, same as Joanna is, I was very lucky with my employer that they were extremely accommodating with whatever needs that I had at that moment, because lupus, and I think if you look at any kind of chronic illness, the accommodations change as your condition evolves. You know, you could be getting better and suddenly you would be facing a flare up, and that can be extremely debilitating. And while a flare up is quite debilitating, you know, some of us, you know, prefer to work through it. Some of us prefer to take some time off and heal and then get back to work. So I think an open line of communication with your team is definitely an incredibly important factor. When I was diagnosed, I was working in the United States at that time. I just graduated. And I had all of these strange symptoms. And while I was not given a lupus diagnosis at that time, I was in ER day in and day out and not being able to understand what's going on. And they were kind enough to put me on a short-term disability leave. And I was then my mom had to fly to the United States to get me back home. I had a couple of months to myself without the pressure of having to work, which was, and a great thing for me was it wasn't just a regular sick leave. That put me on a short-term disability, knowing that, you know, okay, these symptoms are really, you know, they are quite debilitating. And since then, they've been incredibly supportive in terms of accommodations. Like at the moment, I work from home. You know, and one of the, you know, benefits post the COVID pandemic was just the acceptance of workplace and work from home hybrid jobs. So that's something that I could also capitalize on, because now no one has the right to say that you can't work from home, which is, yeah, which proved to be extremely beneficial to me. And I hope it also, you know, in the future really helps everyone who is dealing with these conditions, because we can work and ambition should not be hampered just because you have a condition that you have no control over. Because we're still earning members of society and we can still contribute and go great lengths.
You know, that's that it's interesting. You both, Ayana and Prashant, I think even Juana, you said it, you've touched on this diagnostic journey a bit. And so I do want to pull up another poll and just kind of, for those that are tuning in, to interact a bit more. How long on average do you think it takes for a patient to receive an accurate lupus diagnosis after their symptoms begin to present? 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, or 8 years? That question again, how long on average does it take for a patient to receive an accurate lupus diagnosis after symptoms begin to present? 2, 4, 6, or 8 years? Leave the poll open for another couple seconds while you weigh in your guess. For about half and half, a little bit, 4 or 6 years. Correct answer is 4 years. Somewhere around 4 years is what it takes to get that diagnosis from symptom onset. And so we know that this journey is different for each person. And maybe you guys can weigh in. How long did it take you to find out that it was lupus, and what were some of the missteps that you might want to suggest? Or let's just start off, how long did it take you? The easy question, we can do that round robin, and then we can go into a bit of the journeys. Maybe Prashant, then Ayana, and then Juana, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, so I was diagnosed in 2009, but I thought that, I mean, for many years, I thought that it took about 2 years to get my diagnosis. But now looking back, I actually started with symptoms in 2004. So it took about 5 years. And from 2004 to 2009, I had a lot of different symptoms. But I thought that it was because in 2004, I was diagnosed with hypothyroid, which is also an autoimmune. And I wasn't aware of that back in 2004. So it took about 5 years. So from 2004 to 2009, when I was diagnosed, I had many symptoms. I was experiencing the fatigue, the headaches, what I thought I had carpal tunnel. So it ended up being rheumatoid arthritis. I was diagnosed in 2009, early 2009 with RA. But it took about 5 years. But when my stronger symptoms started was in 2008. I mean, the symptoms were to the point where I couldn't, when I would wake up in the morning, my hands were just like, I couldn't open up my fingers. Just brushing my hair, doing my makeup, or getting dressed was very, very difficult. So I can now say that the strongest symptoms were for about 1.5 years, but really the symptoms started way before. I was diagnosed with different conditions of the carpal tunnel, or I had a pinched nerve, and it was always different things, or the headache. So I went through a neurologist, having to go through classes to do things that would help me relieve the headaches, the migraines, and nothing was helping. Didn't matter what I did. And of course, from all those years, I always heard your labs are excellent. We don't understand why you're going through this. Your labs are, heart rate, heart pressure, everything was like, oh, you're like an athlete. Everything is so perfect. And not knowing that, all these symptoms, something more was happening in my body. And when I was finally diagnosed, I was critically ill, that if I had not gone to the doctor the day I went, I wouldn't be talking today. From from 1 month to another, my platelets went down to, in April, my platelets were at 99. In May, when I was diagnosed, my platelets went from 6,000, normal is 130,000 and higher. Mine were from 6,000 within an hour, 2 hours, they went from 4 to 2,000. So if I had not gone to the doctor that day, I don't think I would be here, because they were just drastically getting lower by the second, I say. So time is very, very important to, again, listening to our body, understanding our body, and just knowing when something is not right, just making sure that we do go to the doctor. And that's how my diagnosis and how long my diagnosis took.
Wow. Ayana, what about you? How long did it?
It took about 2 years from what I can remember, from when I actually started collecting symptoms. That's the best way to put it. And I gathered that from Facebook memories of just seeing random pictures with having a brace on, because I thought I had carpal tunnel, and then it's not carpal tunnel. Then I got diagnosed with tendonitis at one point. And but I think like I was diagnosed at 31. So like around in my 20s, I would find reasons to excuse any type of pains or aches, because the thought of a disease or anything wrong with me was just so far away that I'm sure I was having other symptoms, but I was just like, well, I probably drank too much or something along those lines, and just completely blew past it. But for me, what got me to the place of being actually diagnosed was, again, I thought it was carpal tunnel. Like I said, I'm an engineer during the day. I'm sitting at a computer, tapping, hand problems, wrist problems, got referred to a hand foot specialist, diagnosed with tendonitis, gave me topical cream. That didn't work. Eventually gave me a cortisone shot. That was great. 6 months later, woke up like a crab. Couldn't even open my bedroom door, had to hit one of these moves, took a shower, hot water, loosened it up, went on with my day. Because again, I'm young, carefree, nothing's wrong with me. Next morning, same thing happens. I call my dad. At this point, he has gout. So I was like, this better not be gout, because I don't need gout in my life. That looks horrible. And gout runs in my family. But he said, it doesn't sound like gout, but it sounds like you need to go to the doctor. And my parents are Caribbean, so Caribbean people don't really push to go to the doctor. So the fact that he told me to go to the doctor, it's like, yeah, I should probably go to the doctor. Went to the doctor. Apparently I was running a fever. They drew labs. And my lab showed markers for an autoimmune disease. First time I'd ever even heard the word autoimmune disease. Shortly thereafter, I was officially diagnosed with lupus. So I'm grateful that my journey wasn't, I was not gaslit through the entire journey, outside of having that one being diagnosed with tendonitis. And maybe I did have tendonitis, who knows? It could have been tendonitis, or it could have been lupus. We'll never know. But for the most part, my doctor was very straightforward once I started having the crab claws. So again, I know my story is probably a lot easier than many lupus warriors who deal with being told that nothing's wrong with them, everything looks fine, everything checks out. They're imagining it, or whatever other things people have been told. But I am very blessed with how my journey went to diagnosis.
It's interesting that we both brought up joint pain. My symptoms started with IBS-like symptoms. So, and unfortunately, when an overweight woman walks into a doctor's office, everything wrong with her is attributed to the fact that she's fat. That's basically what happened to me for the first couple of years, where not only the medical system gaslighted me, but I gaslit myself, saying, I need to eat healthy, I need to exercise more, I need to, fill in the blank. The IBS got worse as time went by, to the point where I remember for an entire week, the only thing I could consume was just a glass of hot chocolate every day. And that would literally be the only thing I was able to digest at that point in time. In spite of it, I was not given a diagnosis of an autoimmune disease. Instead, I was subjected to a whole horde of blood tests that I'd never seen. They scared me because I was in the US alone. My family is from India, and I had my mom on call in ER the entire night. Poor thing was up the entire night while I was there for a couple of hours. And I guess it was partly frustrating because I still won't get an autoimmune diagnosis in the US. When I came back to India and then started getting joint pain and all of these other systems that you would typically associate with an autoimmune disease, when that possibility was considered. But I did go through several CT scans. I visited oncologists. So it was equal parts frustrating, but then I was relieved that, that I'm not going to die because of some worse condition that there is. So in my case, oh, thank God it's lupus. So what's the reaction? But that was just the start of a really difficult journey. I think it led to a lot of learning for me as well in my diagnosis. The word lupus didn't come into my life though till very recently. I was given a diagnosis of MCTD, which is, I think it's called mixed connective tissue disease, because my main symptom was mostly later in the last couple of years was joint pain. But as my symptoms evolved and the markers evolved as well, we finally got a lupus diagnosis, which was great. So because now I knew what I was dealing with.
Thank you so much. I know we have a little bit of time remaining, and we got inquiry about pregnancy and motherhood, and childbirth. And so is there, I'd like us to kind of spend a couple minutes talking about that and your experiences and challenges. Does lupus impact your fertility? How does it impact also your home life? Ayanna, I see your face is like, getting ready to go.
I don't have any kids. I'm gonna say that. I had fibroid surgery in December, with the plan of eventually getting pregnant, but full disclosure, I'm going through a divorce. So that's not gonna happen. I probably just shocked Irene. I guess no one actually says that with that much joy in their heart. But the plan was for me to eventually get pregnant. And why I'm sharing this is like I said, I had fibroid surgery. I had 7 very large fibroids, like the size of grapefruit. And I couldn't have the fibroid. It was supposed to be scheduled for October. I couldn't have it till December because lupus. I was in a flare, so I had to wait for that. At that point, I'm still on Imuron. And the reason why I was not on CellCept, which is what I usually take as an immunosuppressant, is because CellCept, you cannot take it during pregnancy. And my rheumatologist was preparing my body for that. So she had me on Imuron. I also was not on Benelista because I'm now on the Benelista infusions because she initially didn't put me on Benelista because Benelista is something that you can't use while you're pregnant. So I don't have any information on pregnancy, but as somebody who initially was going through that journey to prepare her body to get pregnant, I just wanted to share that as far as what drugs are safe to take while you're gearing up to get pregnant or while you're pregnant for those women that are in that mindset as far as trying to get themselves ready for that. I'm going to be 41 in November, and that's something that they also kept pressing when you turn 40, especially don't have any kids, then people start essentially telling you your time is almost up. So that is something I try to ignore, and I understand medical professions have to give you all of the information. But apparently, since my mom menopaused late, it gives me a little more time to eventually have kids. So I just wanted to share that those are the drugs as far as what you can take while you're pregnant versus what you can't. And this is all the information my rheumatologist gave me. So obviously do your research and talk to your doctors. Don't just take my word for all of this, but I just want to share my experience. So yeah.
I was diagnosed when I was 39 years old. So I already had both of my boys. They're adults now, and I'm a grandmother. But I can remember when I was pregnant with my first son back in, he's 27. I remember going through some problems while I was pregnant. I almost lost him. And but I did have to go through a lot of care with my doctors. I was not diagnosed back when I was 25, but I don't know. I mean, thinking back, I could have already been or had something because I did have trouble with my 2 pregnancies. As far as, having more children after I was diagnosed, I never thought about that, especially looking at my children and what they were going through when they really thought that I was going to die, being in ICU for 7 days when I was diagnosed. So it wasn't easy for me, and it wasn't easy for my children. So as far as I really never talked to my doctors about getting pregnant again after my diagnosis, but I do know that I have a younger sister who also has lupus, and before she found out she had lupus, she had 6 miscarriages. So I know that with her, it was very difficult, and after her diagnosis, she was only given Plaquenil because she wanted to have children. So she couldn't take any other medication for her lupus other than Plaquenil. So I wouldn't be able to say from my own experience if I could or not, because I had already my children, but my children were affected due to my diagnosis.
Same as Ayana, I don't have any kids. I'm not married yet. So, but I just really wish that this is a topic that would kind of gain more traction. There would be more knowledge about it, because I, for one, when they take your health information, things like those, and you indicate that, you're not married, doctors don't even attempt to educate you on what lupus would look like once you are, or once you get pregnant, or once you have children, or, are trying for children. So I really hope that this kind of becomes natural part of when an autoimmune diagnosis is delivered, is how that's going to kind of affect you going forward in life as well. Because I'll be very honest, I have no idea what it's going to look like. I have no idea how to communicate the said complications to my significant other as well, which is a very important part of taking these decisions as well. And so that's my two bit of advice to the gods of the healthcare system, that they do incorporate these extremely essential topics, especially when you are delivering a diagnosis of an autoimmune disease, especially to females.
That's actually a very great wrap up piece. Lupus is not a point in time. It is a journey throughout life. And there's various times in your life that it's going to change with your work, with family planning, menopause, all of that that's incorporated into your treatment, making sure that you have a conversation with your provider. But I mean, I've heard you guys saying you've had to have the conversation, but then also they need to initiate some conversations, because I can't remember who said it. You didn't know what you didn't know. Ayana, I think with your accommodations, you didn't know what you needed until you needed it. And so being able to prep and have that conversation is extremely important. We thank you for all of, what you've shared today. And as we're about to wrap up, I know we're a bit behind. And so just very, very briefly, we get patients and general audiences, but we also get a lot of researchers, healthcare providers, industry and policymakers that tune into our events. And I know, as you mentioned, Pressure, having the conversation throughout about, all the different stages of life. But is there any other takeaway that you guys would each like to do very briefly that you would recommend for one or all of those different viewer groups to help them better support women living with lupus? And so Pressure, will start with you, then Ayana, and then Wana.
Sure, yeah. I think a major focus area for me would be mental health, which is often ignored, especially when you have a chronic illness. It's something that completely changes your life. So definitely a conversation about mental health and what are the touch points during your lupus journey is when you're going to need support and what kind of support you're going to need. So it's not just about seeing a therapist, but it's about group therapy. It's about alternative therapies like art, music, whatever works for you. So definitely having a conversation with especially patients to whom you've just said, oh, by the way, you have an autoimmune disease, is to understand and help them understand what kind of mental health support they're going to need throughout their entire life, because lupus is a co-pilot forever, and their needs are going to change at every single during every single life event that they're going to have, and how what is the best way for them to deal with it.
Pressure took my answer, but so everything that she said, yes. So I'm going to talk to the people who I know the initial survey, how does lupus affect you? To the people who are friends and families of somebody who has lupus. One of the big reasons for my divorce, full transparency, is I don't think my husband knew what he was getting into. So he didn't know how to support me. He didn't know what things look like. And I think it just became too much. So if you are in a relationship with somebody with lupus, if you're friends or family or planning on getting married to someone with lupus, just understand, as Precious said, that's a co-pilot. Everything that you guys do in that marriage, lupus is always going to be there, front and center. Even if it's not there, it's going to show up at some point. So my message is to the people that are have loved ones support or in the lives of somebody with lupus, just understand what they're going to the best of your ability. But if you're going to marry somebody with lupus, know what you're getting into, because it's going to be a wild ride.
And you two ladies took my answers too, but it definitely, with lupus, if with our families, I think we have to be open, transparent as to what we're going through, and for the families, just to support their loved ones that are living with these conditions, and also for the caregivers, loved ones, to also learn about this condition, because lupus is not only affecting the patient, it's also affecting our children, our husbands, our mother, sisters. So they also need to be part of or understand or learn about lupus, but they also need to receive the support. So that's one of the things that we Looms for Lupus always talk about. And we support not only those living with lupus, but the caregivers, because a lot of the times the caregivers are also going through their struggles. Looking at their loved one going through all that we go through is not easy. And having that support for the children as well. My children went through very hard, difficult times because they didn't know if their mom was going to be alive the following day. So definitely the support and the mental health aspect, we definitely need to get the help that we need as lupus patients, but as loved ones as well. And just being open and with your doctor, having a good relationship with your medical providers, and as a patient, just knowing that it's okay not to be okay a lot of the times, and not to be so hard on yourself.
So now you know why we refer to them as lupus warriors, right? These amazing women. We thank you so much for, opening up, being transparent, sharing your story, and your journey, that someone can hear it, learn from it, and utilize pieces to help their own journey or to support someone in their lupus journey. And honestly, some of the nuggets that you guys threw out go far beyond lupus and just supporting others that are in our lives or that we're treating, or in the professional, or even our coworkers, through understanding who they are as a person and the things that they're individually going through. So thank you again for all of your time and your insight and sharing with us today. We'd also like to thank Eli Lilly and Company and Aurinia Pharmaceuticals for their support of this event and our SWHR's lupus program. We will be sending out an email with the recording of today's webinar to all registrants, as well as post the recording on the event's webpage for future viewing. So please be on the lookout for that, and feel free to share with others. For more information about lupus and other women's health topics, resources and events, or to sign up for our newsletter, visit our website at www.swhr.org. And as a spoiler alert, we are looking forward to having a toolkit for women who are living with lupus to help them understand navigate the patient journey. So be on the lookout for that, as that will be coming out this fall. We also invite you to connect with us on social media as we continue this very important conversation with hashtag SWHR Talks Lupus and hashtag SWHR Talks Autoimmune. Thank you for joining us.